Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, very special guest. We know him as the Sinister Minister, James Vandenberg. He's been everywhere. He's done everything. He's, of course, one of the greatest managers of all time. He is
Thank you.
Father James Mitchell. Father James, welcome to the two-man power trip. How you doing?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing fine.
What is going on with you in the NWA? You got a huge pay-per-view coming up this weekend, NWA Samhain, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yes, it is Samhain. It looks like it's pronounced Samhain, but it's actually a Gaelic ancient pronunciation. And Samhain is the forerunner of what we here in the United States call Halloween. And it was celebrated for the end of the harvest and going into the winter. And it was a time when they believed that the veil between the living and the dead opened for a brief period of time, and the spirits of the dead would wander the streets and get involved in all sorts of misadventures. And that led over time to us practicing it over here, where children dress up as ghosts and goblins, and if you don't give them something nice, they'll do something mean to you, hence trick or treat. So anyhow, hopefully this is going to be a yearly event, I would hope. I believe it's going to be our first time in Cleveland, at least first time in Cleveland since I've been there for 2 years. So it's going to be an exciting show, and everybody should make sure they get out to it. You can get tickets for it live at nwatix.com. It can be purchased on pay-per-view on Fight TV. That's FITE TV.com. And we'll just get into it from there.
So obviously this is a big pay-per-view, and you're saying like around Halloween time. I was actually thinking like, okay, did Billy come up with this, or did Father James Mitchell come up with this as far as the name of the pay-per-view and the show? Because this seems right up your alley.
No, they came up with it. Actually, Joe Galley, one of our producers and play-by-play man, he walked up to me and he said, I need you to come up with a promo for Samhain. And I said, you mean Samhain? He said, no, Samhain. I said, what are you talking about? Is that a wrestler? Am I getting a new guy to manage or what? He said, no, it's pay-per-view. And I guess Billy had written a song at some point where the refrain in it was him saying Samhain, Samhain over and over again. I believe the song was called The Witch. But a lot of people, especially people in the music business, think that it would be pronounced that way because the singer Glenn Danzig, who used to be in the Misfits,
Oh yes.
his second band was Samhain, and I don't know if he didn't know how to pronounce it or he just figured it was easier to anglicize it. and,
Yes.
and so most people refer to it as Samhain. So anyhow, he asked me to come up with a promo, and I told him, I believe, well, you can't use that as a theme song because it's not the right, it's not being pronounced the right way unless he wants to go in the studio and re-record it. So yeah, they came up with the concept and told me that they wanted me to be the master of ceremonies, appropriately enough. And I'm really looking forward to it. It ought to be a fun night.
Something you're used to, obviously, right?
Yes.
Being a master of
Yes.
ceremonies.
Yes, that is true.
You've done that a few times in your life for sure. And of course, it is at Tempe Live at the Cleveland Masonic in Cleveland, Ohio. Like you said, October 28th on pay-per-view. Interestingly enough, the Devil's Last Dance Ultimate Hardcore War involves you. If Sal and Gags, their team, ends up losing, they will be forever indentured to you, Father James Mitchell. What do you think about the Ultimate Hardcore War?
Well, it's sort of a necessary evil. I've tried to get rid of Sal and Gags for months. You know, they both kind of came crawling to me back in the day, looking for opportunity. And I saw them as being useful idiots. And I told them all they had to do was listen to me and I would elevate their careers. In the meantime, if you followed the television product, you would find out that both of them turned into bungling nincompoops, and they didn't follow orders. And I set them free, but I haven't been able to get them out of my hair. They keep coming back. They've got the tenacity of a cockroach. Neither one of them will go So the stipulations are that I will have my team initially, which would be consisting of Judais and Max the Impaler, and that I would add whomever I wanted to it, which thus far we have Magic Jake and Barker Cody and Alex Misery, and they have on Sal and Gags have Koa Laksamana and Dak Draper and Mims, it appears. And the deal is, if they lose, they will have to bow down before me and sign their names in blood and be my indentured servants that I can just mistreat any way I want to. So they're in for a hell of a night.
This is the devil's dance, if you will. If like
Yes.
Metallica once says, the devil's dance.
That is correct. That is correct.
When you like are putting this together, I mean, the Ultimate Hardcore War, the Devil's Dance, is this all you, or is this, you know, maybe a little bit of Max, a little bit of Judais? I mean, is this all your brainchild?
No, there's input from the whole team. Judais and Max are some pretty diabolical and violent performers, and I definitely accept their input. They've come up with a lot of ideas, and ultimately, what it's going to come down to is there are no rules, really, at all. So pretty much anything goes. The only thing that's guaranteed is pain and agony.
Are you quoting Clubber Lang there? You know, prediction pain.
Maybe a little.
When you look at NWA and what's going on, I feel like it's just you being there. It makes it very interesting to me because it has an old school flavor to it, but it has like a new twist, if you will. You know what I mean? You remind me of that old school, scary like wrestling manager that you know you want to you triangle, you hate the guy, you know, but there's a new twist on it. You always have something up your sleeve, right?
Yeah, you got to stay on top of things. And never show your hand completely. Always be malleable like water. Always adaptable. So I never let anybody figure me out.
Love it. What do you think about Billy? Do you like Billy? Do you get along with Billy? What's the relationship like with Billy Corgan?
Great. You know, it's professional. We don't go fishing. I don't get on his yacht with him or anything like that. I don't know that he has a yacht, but he's a great guy to work for. He clearly loves the business. He's the only rock star I've ever met who doesn't act like a rock star. Very approachable, but he has a good mind for the business and a real passion for this. Because you know why? I heard some moron talking to me the other night in a bar, and they said that he was a money mark. And I was like, no, you dumbass. You don't even know what a money mark is. A money mark is when wrestlers get a money backer and take his money to finance their program and run it into the ground until they drain him dry and find another one. Billy has financed this 100% out of his own pocket, and it is not cheap. So that's why I laugh anytime somebody says something like that, because they clearly don't know what the hell they're talking about. That is, and even though it's a small operation, that's still expensive as hell. You look at all the production people that are flown in. You look at all the hotels, and he puts us up in real nice hotels. Catering's good. I mean, this is. I wouldn't even dare to take a guess at how much it's cost him every year to be running this. But it's now paying off because, as I'm sure you may have heard by now, we signed a deal with CW Network for 2 separate shows, one of which will be the primary wrestling weekly show, and the other one will be a reality show showing the behind the scenes of what goes on with this rock star pursuing his passion and everything that's going on behind the scenes and the machinations of that and whatnot. So it's going to be a big year for the NWA, and I'm really excited. I mean, so he's spent his money wisely. He didn't piss it all away like a lot of people in his position would have done. I think he's been wise with his financial decisions, and they've paid off now, because now we're on a real network. And I see nothing but bright things ahead for us, because it's a different looking product too. It is studio wrestling. Now, whether it stays that way or not, I'm not certain at this point, but it has a different vibe. And if you're going, I always tell people in wrestling, if you want to stand out, you've got to be different. You know, if everybody's a star, nobody's a star. If everybody's got muscles, nobody has muscles. You know what I mean? You've got to,
Yep.
Everybody has to find their own special personality, and you put their unique imprint on things. And a lot of wrestling companies over the years, since I've been in the business, obviously lots of people tried to copy the WWE format and just failed miserably at it. A lot of people tried, and to this day, some still do, copy the old ECW format and the way that was produced, but you're not doing anything new. Now, studio wrestling has been gone long enough that it comes back to that phrase, what's old is new again. We haven't seen studio wrestling in 30 years or something like that. It's been a long time. So it has a different ambiance, but he's invested in a lot of new production and new camera cranes and rigs, and I mean, all that stuff's out of my pay grade. But the show has a good look to it. I don't know if you've seen it in the last month or 6 weeks or whatever, but they've really done some upgrades getting ready to go into CW network. So it's gonna, I think NWA is gonna have a banner year, a good future ahead of it, because it is different enough. It's not a throwback promotion. But he wants to focus more on the storytelling and the believability of what you're seeing in the ring. Less emphasis on cutting quadruple somersaults while a guy's standing there for 15 seconds waiting on you to set it up and do it. You know, more snug, making it look like an actual contest. And we've got a lot of big guys that can do that. So it's an exciting product if you get a chance to watch it, and everyone should.
Yeah, that's awesome about the CW. Congrats on that. I'm just surprised that guy. What does he think at the bar? What did he think? It's a vanity project or something for Billy?
Yeah.
I mean, there's P&L, there's ROI. I mean, he's got he's trying to make money here, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this, millionaires and billionaires do things differently than the rest of us. If he could, this was his passion besides rock and roll. And how many times has he sold out Madison Square Garden? Sometimes you need something to chase, to chase another dream when you've conquered the rest of the world. And that's why I think he's really emotionally and financially invested in it. Very creative guy.
Yeah, and I saw him over the summer. He still got it. His voice is still great. The band's still awesome. So that's good.
Yep.
When you look at it too, I had the chance to interview him about a year and a half ago, and I was surprised. No talk about Smashing Pumpkins like that he wanted to, maybe for 2 seconds or something.
Right.
It was all wrestling. He wanted nothing, talking old school wrestling, NWA, talking about what he likes about the business. I was just like surprised, like, wow, he's like an historian, but he's also very dedicated to wrestling. It's not a vanity project at all. He's like a super smart to the business.
No, and this isn't a thing where Billy Corgan's putting himself on television nonstop because he's already been there. It's not like Dixie Carter putting herself on TV, or like Money Marks that used to come through Memphis and that neck of the woods a lot. That happened a lot in Southern wrestling, where again, once you got the money mark, in order to keep those checks coming, you'd make sure you put them on TV, so they were too busy looking at their own reflection in a pool of water to see that they're getting ripped off. Billy's not doing that, and he doesn't. I mean, he's on TV a little bit. I mean, look, frankly, at this stage, the Billy Corgan show If it was just Billy Corgan, if that's what he wanted to do, it would probably draw bigger ratings than an upstart wrestling company. But it's not about him. It's about his love for the game and his love for the talent that he handpicks. He very often says when we have our talent meetings, he says, "Look, you guys are here because I want you to be here.
Right.
The buck stops with me. If I don't want you here, you won't be here. So don't be running around thinking there's any kind of politicking or stupid bullshit like that going on." It's just a really easy environment, and it's flattering that somebody of his stature thinks highly enough of any of us to give us that opportunity and to help him achieve his dream.
How did you get in? Like, did you know him ahead of time, or did you know somebody else within the NWA that brought you in?
I'd met Billy, 22 years ago in ECW.
Oh, right.
Probably in Chicago. And so yeah, and he came through TNA backstage a couple times. So, but yeah, he was doing a project like 10 years ago, some other reality show, and Raven was working with him, and Raven was trying to get me in. And at that time, running my own business, I couldn't make time to do it. And anyhow, that fell through for him. But Pat Kenny, who is the head of talent relations, vice president of whatever the Jim Ross title is called,
yes.
Head of talent relations, he called me and said that they wanted to put me together with Judais and bring me in for NWA 73. And that was, almost like a magical kismet sort of thing, because Judais, who's been known as other names over the years, he was Michael Judas in Puerto Rico and a lot of the Indies, and he wrestled in TNA Impact as Murphy, I believe. But he was a guy right before I left Impact in 2008. I was actively trying to get him in there, because the thing with Abyss was going away, and Ricky Banderas, Judas Macias,
right.
Macias, he was going back to Mexico, and I was trying to find a talent that I could move forward with, because you can't just put me with a regular looking guy. I need a monster.
Right.
That's what I do. It's my specialty. If you put me with AJ Styles, it just wouldn't look right.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
The ambiance isn't right. So I was really, it was like a wish, a dream come true that I had totally given up on. And this opportunity came, and I jumped right on it. I've had a great time there. The first time I went in there was NWA 73 in St. Louis in the historic Chase Ballroom.
Yeah.
Where Sam Muchnick had all those great shows for God knows how many years, 30, 40 years. Real historic place, has a good vibe to it. So it's a great, I told somebody else the other day, it feels like I've come full circle and come back home, because the NWA was the first wrestling that I was introduced to in the early to mid 70s as a child. And even though I had managed the NWA Tag Team Champions when they were affiliated with TNA, the New Church, and I led Abyss to an NWA World Championship over Sting, it was still more under the umbrella of TNA Impact. So this is, Billy bought the NWA lock, stock, and barrel. So it is a continuation of the same lineage, and it just feels like home. Everything about it feels like where I need to be.
And Max the Impaler fits in perfectly with you too. My God, right at a perfect casting for Father James Mitchell, big time.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's I don't know that you could find better casting for either one of us. if someone were to look at me and say, we need to put you with somebody, or, if this monster came in, well, who are we going to get to be the Max's mouthpiece? It's Max is just one amazing talent, and I've been really proud of helping to develop and groom Max over the last what's been a year and a half or so that we've been together, and Max is now the NWA Women's Television Champion, which Max won in the same evening that Kinsey Page, whom she won it from, went on to win the NWA title. And if you saw that pay-per-view, NWA 75, you would see basically that Max took Kinsey Page and whipped her around like a dead trout or something. So that tells me when the time comes, I already know that Max is the uncrowned NWA Women's Champion. But we have this obligation right now with the television championship. And when the time comes, I have no doubt that Max will be crowned the NWA Women's Television Champion. And, maybe we'll give the TV title to Kinsey in a nice box with a bow on it as a lovely parting gift or something, a consolation prize.
I got to bring Raven back up just for a second.
Yeah.
Any heat there with you and Raven? Because, you guys kind of scalped his head. You know what I mean? You guys really did some real damage there.
Yeah, well, okay, on as Billy says, the inside baseball stuff. That feud with Raven had a lot of, it worked because there were a lot of elements of reality to it. Now, when I first met Raven, he had come into WCW a little bit after, a month or two after I'd gotten there. And he was kind of an asshole. Can we use profanity here? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, he was kind of an asshole. And, and he'd be the first to admit back then he was all fucked up on drugs and whatnot. And I couldn't stand him for the first few months that I met him. And then we got to be friendly. But then when I came into ECW, Raven had that carry my bags kind of thing going on. And I'd already, I started to feel by the time I got to TNA, and then Raven followed me there. By the time I got to TNA, I felt like, I'd come into my own, and I don't need to be bowing in supplication before you, Raven. And so that there was a little bit of that on the backstage reality thing going on. And anyway, so when he wanted to do the head shave stipulation, and long story short, which I think was part of sabotage, instead of being left with all the grooming supplies I was supposed to be left with, I was left with sheep shears. I had no idea. And they look like jack-o'-lantern teeth instead of the kind of trimmers you put on your face. And, basically it's the referee's giving us the Iggy to go home. The pay-per-view is going off there. It's like, okay, we've got like 45 seconds or a minute, whatever it was, and we've got to get this thing on and get it done. So combination of adrenaline and trying to beat the clock. Right. I had those things in there. I literally scalped him. He's on YouTube somewhere talking about the fact that he had to wind up getting hair transplants years later because his hair never grew back properly. And if you look at that footage, it's coming off like I was on it with a cheese grater or a potato peeler. And when I came through the back, I was already in the back, and he came through. Oh, and he was hot as hell. And he went to take a swing at me, and he pulled it at the last second. I could actually feel the concussion of the air stopping, almost just barely. It's almost like a bullet flew by my face. And Slash, Wolfie D, jumped in between us. He was real pissed off, but within a couple of days it was over. But that was a great storyline, and again, it had enough elements of the master and the student breaking apart. Kind of the same thing he did with a lot of people he's feuded with. He kind of did that with Stevie Richards. He did it with CM Punk,
Yep.
But there was a very real element of that when I was involved with Raven, because I was like, I'm not in your shadow anymore. That's really, I respect you and I appreciate the opportunities you've given me, but you don't get to tell me what the fuck to do anymore. I can do
Yeah.
my own promos. I don't need your input. And
Yep.
May the best man win. So it was a lot of fun. It took me to the next level. And that, as I've said before, that's when that feud was when I said, okay, however many years in I'd been to the business, at that point I said, okay, I've finally mastered my craft. Now I know what to do every time I go out there.
When that happens, and now obviously, he flips out backstage, but it's one of those memorable moments for NWA TNA that kind of just lives on for me. Anyway, it's like, oh my god, they scalped his ass, like that was real, kind of thing. Like, oh my god, they hate each other.
Yeah. Well, historically, hair shaving matches were like one of the most humiliating kind of stipulations
Yep.
you could put on somebody, and they would draw big money. Gorgeous George got his head shaved famously back in the 50s, early 60s. Bill Dundee's wife, lost her hair. And how crazy was that for a woman to get her head shaved in the 70s? And in Mexico, of course, that's a tradition. But I will say, and I have not seen anything to the contrary, that might be the single most brutal head shaving in the history of pro wrestling. It's gruesome. And when I got home, I got off the plane, and my wife fired up the pay-per-view for me on the DVR, or the TiVo, as I think they were called back then. And I was sitting there eating some Stouffer's lasagna as it was going to the end. When that meat started curling up off of his head, kind of looking like noodles and dropping into pools of blood, I about threw up. I had to put the lasagna down. So it was really brutal.
Oh man, yeah, I could see why he was pretty pissed. Yeah, for sure. And I feel like with you and Abyss, I feel like you brought him to the next level too. I mean, Raven kind of helps you. You kind of pay it forward. You really brought Abyss to that next level. He he needed a mouthpiece and he needed a good manager.
Yes, I did help elevate him, but he elevated me too. He used to refer to it as like Keith Richards and Mick Jagger, or David Lee Roth and Eddie Van Halen kind of thing. That was another great pairing. It was just the perfect combination of mouth and monster, and that was certainly a career highlight. I think the world of that guy, and that was such a fun run on at the time we were on Spike TV, where we would have been, I guess technically we were the number 2 wrestling company, right?
Yep, definitely.
At the time,
yeah,
right.
Yep.
Had good, at that point, and probably to this day, nobody's ever going to take over the WWE. But sort of like Bill Barron used to talk about, they used to run these commercials when I was a little kid about Avis versus Hertz rental cars.
Yep.
And I think Avis was number 2. And they would acknowledge in their commercials, yeah, we're number 2. We're the best number 2 there is, So yeah, the TNA at that time, that was in my opinion, when TNA got on Spike, from about 2005 until maybe the summer of 2008 were the best years creatively and whatnot. Now, granted, that just happens to coincide with when I left, but I think around 2009, it just went off the rails, which is a shame. I'm not a guy that wishes ill on any wrestling company, but God, they did some stupid shit there. And it was, you've heard of the old story of Nero fiddling while Rome burned, or the fable of the emperor wearing no clothes.
Yes.
Nobody had the balls to tell the emperor he was naked. That's kind of the way it was. So even though Dixie owned the company, she sort of got used as a money mark, because they put her on TV. Or maybe she insisted on being on TV and nobody had the balls to say, you don't belong on TV, Dixie. You're a nice lady, but
Right.
you're not, I don't know who's a big feat. You're not Raquel Welch or whatever. You're not a star.
Yeah.
So, however, I will give them this. After everything burnt to the ground, my dear friend Scott Demore and his crew, they've done a slow but steady rebuilding of the brand, and they had to go from ground zero, but they've done a pretty good job of trying to fix the unfixable, I think.
When you look at it now, I mean, obviously you've been there a few times. This is completely different. You're liking kind of what you're seeing, because I know you've been in and out kind of a few times there with Rosemary and Sue Young and doing different things there.
Yeah, I don't watch Impact unless I say this all the time, unless I'm working for a wrestling company. I don't watch the product, and I've been that way since probably about the time I went to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I wouldn't watch anything other than Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and then when I didn't have a gig, I'd watch WWF and WCW. When I got to WCW, I didn't pay attention to any other companies. When I got to ECW, same thing. When I started TNA, the same thing. So I could not tell you what's going on in any company unless I'm in the middle of it at that moment. I mean, actually, people ask. I had kids come up to me back in the day when I was on Impact and whatnot with Abyss that long ago. I used to have little kids asking me about John Cena, and he was huge. I had no fucking idea who he was. I'd read the name online. I never saw him. I mean, and there's a ton of people, and that's not disrespect to my professional colleagues. I don't have time for it, and I just had a kid a few years ago. So, unless something puts money in my pocket or makes me laugh or have some profound insight or an orgasm, I don't have time for it. So that's why, I'm focused on what's going on in NWA and their march forward and their ascension back up to where they need to be in the wrestling food chain.
Love it. Now, you mentioned, though, nobody's going to beat WWE, but years ago, 20 plus years ago, somebody did actually beat WWE, WCW, and they beat them 83 straight weeks. And obviously, that's kind of lowballing it, because if you actually look into it, it's actually well more than 83 weeks. I mean, it was 2 years of dominance, really.
Right.
You're there at that point. Are you sensing like, hey, this is something different? We're really the best. Are you sensing you're number one, or are you still sensing, we're still number two? Because they've been around for 50 years.
No, when the Monday Night Wars were going on, I got there in late '96, I think, very early '97. We were definitely kicking Vince McMahon's ass, and you could. Although it was interesting, now that was because Kanyon used to always watch all the shows. I'd kind of be stuck in a situation where I would have to. But, Steve Austin was on the rise and all that. They were basically rebuilding from the ashes because Eric took all their talent, They had to make new talent. So it was cool watching the Phoenix rise from the ashes at that time. But they still weren't quite. I mean, when I would see their show, it felt secondary to ours, but there was this arc where you could where Bret Hart started really coming into his own, and Steve Austin and God, who was the cast of characters, and Mankind was coming on. They were being creative and doing new things and taking chances, whereas WCW just became the NWO show. And they just ran that ship into the ground. I mean, it was a great moneymaker. It was great, big business, and everybody talked about it. But they just stayed on that one that one program too long and overdid it. And while they were stuck in that one gear, Vince McMahon just kept shifting higher and higher and higher and coming up with new stuff. And then he became the cool show, and WCW became the uncool show, because then we had standards and practices and whatnot to where, you could be on WWE television saying, I'm going to kick your ass, and Hulk Hogan, due to Turner Broadcasting standards and practices, would say, I'm going to have to kick your butt. So that little thing, it's funny how things flip-flopped back in the day. And another thing with Vince, I don't know how long you've been watching wrestling, but
40 years.
When Turner started taking all of his talent in the early days, and Vince was running those skits.
The Huckster and the Nacho Man.
Yeah.
Billionaire Ted, Scheme Gene.
Yeah. Yeah. But, his story then would be, I'm being bullied by this billionaire who's trying to run me out of business, and it's so unfair. And they're so crude, and we have family entertainment. And Vince would stay that way as long as they were being dirty. And this goes back to what I was telling you at the beginning. You have to be different.
Yeah.
So once WCW got stuck with the, excuse me, I lost this. Once WCW got told from CNN Tower what they could and could not do, to the point to where they had the restrictions of a Saturday morning kids cartoon, then Vince just turned right back around, and it went from, we're family friendly entertainment, to no, we're not boring old kid stuff, and we tackle mature issues and whatnot. So, and again, Vince is always evolving. That's why he was always the best. Whether you like him or even his presentation, you can't deny he was the most successful.
Yeah, that's for sure. It's just interesting at that point, WCW, like the NWO is very serious, very real. Hall and Nash, I mean, that's the real names. But then they bring in Glacier, Mortis, Wrath. I mean, and obviously Ernest the Cat Miller is a real kick-ass kickboxer, karate guy. But I mean, he's involved in that storyline too. Did you think that was weird? It was like, okay, are we doing Mortal Kombat stuff? Or are we doing realism?
Well, at the time when I was presented with the opportunity, all I thought was, oh my God, I'm going to make some money for the first time in my life, and get to work with one of my best friends, Chris Kanyon.
Yep.
It was a dream come true. I was so blinded by the life-changing opportunity that at first I didn't really think of it. That I was excited just to be on the national stage like that. I was on the number one rated television, cable television show in the country. But we definitely were fish out of water. But again, even though we weren't going to get the kind of push we wanted, we certainly got a lot of exposure. We had an amazing presentation with the light show and the lasers. So we were memorable because we were so different. We had a ceiling above our heads because of the direction the company went in, but they'd already spent so much money developing this. They had to run that horse for a while. So we got about a year, I think, out of that run, maybe a little bit more. And it was a lot. It was a lot of fun and a great time to be in the wrestling business. But it was, Eric was a little above before his time on that, because video games hadn't quite turned into the juggernaut that they became. Yep. But he was looking at the time of wanting to market and then cater to that demographic, the kids. Because he had when I met Eric, his kid was probably right at the age to have, what were those things called, Game Boys, or Nintendo little hand consoles and stuff like that.
Yep.
So he probably saw kids coming to his house and saw what they were into and said, you know what, let's transpose this to wrestling, and we could probably sell the hell out of it. And had they not switched gears so suddenly and gone with the NWO, it considering the other things that they had been doing before that with the Dungeon of Doom and no knock to my pal Kevin Sullivan, because even he explained, I don't know if you've heard it, he explained why the Dungeon of Doom was so silly, and that was because they were trying to keep Hogan happy.
Oh yeah,
and they had to keep feeding him monsters, and they also had to be family friendly, so they couldn't be that evil and that violent, just hokey and Halloween cartoony enough. Eric was ahead of his time with Blood Runs Cold, and if somebody would have tried that again, or I don't know, 5 years ago, or tried it for the first time 5 years ago, it probably would have gotten over a lot better than it did. But people still remember it.
It's funny when they redid it. I don't know if you were gone, I guess, at this point, but they redid Blood Runs Cold. It was Blood Runs Cold again, and he was a heel this time, so he could care less. He just was doing it. Yeah, it was pretty funny. It didn't last long.
What was this, Glacier?
Yeah, he did Blood Runs Cold, and he goes again, and we're like, oh, come on. But he was all cocky about it, and he didn't really want to sign autographs. He wanted nothing. Oh, it only lasted a short time. I was like, all right, that's kind of funny, kind of like making fun of itself, I guess.
But yeah, well, I know that he had changed his gimmick at one point to Coach Buzz Stern, or something like that. But again, I told you, when I leave a company, I'm not like a stalking girlfriend.
You missed it. Yeah,
I'm done. Yeah. I'm done. You won't find me calling you and trying to bugging the shit out of you and knocking on your door every day. But that's funny. Blood Runs Cold again.
Yes. So did you get fired, get released, or did your contract just run out and like you just went off and kind of just went your own direction?
I wasn't fired for cause. I had my contract rolled over twice after the first year. I should have been done the first year.
Wow. Because
right about the time they took me off TV, my contract would have about been over. And it rolled over twice. And then after the third contract automatically rolled over and was coming to an end, I got the night. I think it was J.J. Dillon called me and said that they were going to exercise the right to not renew my contract. So that may be a fancy way for saying you're fired because we've paid you money for years to sit home and do nothing.
Right.
But yeah, there's no hostility behind it. And then that opened up the door for ECW.
It is okay if you rip Kevin Sullivan because he is a buddy of mine. I was with him a few weekends ago. He actually talked to him earlier today. So it's okay if you rip him and say the Dungeon of Doom is a horrible idea and he's a terrible booker. It's all right.
Well, when I was watching, because I'd watched Kevin Sullivan prior to all that, and I remembered him from when I was a kid. I knew he had a great mind, but this is what happens when you're out, when you're not inside of the bubble. You're an outsider looking in. You don't know what's going on. And I used to think, God, Kevin's just lost his fucking mind. What is this goofy shit? The shark and the Zodiac and the leprechaun and all that goofy shit they had. But, fast forward years later, and when he would do those deep dives, he may have done them with you. This may have been where I heard him. But I also talked to him in person at Impact after not seeing him for years. And he was just explaining that to me. And it was so fascinating. And it just reminded me of, no matter how long I've been in the business, you still keep learning. Still. It made me see things in an entirely different perspective because I've always been talent. I've never been management or, upper management or involved in the creative process and having to make the decisions based on because of the money you have invested in this, you have to massage it a certain way. I would have never thought of things that way. But now, after listening to the way Kevin explained that, I was like, well, that's very fascinating. And what he did was absolutely sensible. I mean, what was his other alternative?
Right.
Really? He's babysitting Hulk Hogan. So, I went from 30 years ago thinking it was the dumbest shit I'd ever seen in my life to now go, I can look at it in context and go, okay, that's pretty clever. I see what you're doing there. But it was you know, my Gene Anderson told me right when I was getting started in the wrestling business. Gene Anderson from the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, Ole Anderson's
yeah,
partner.
of course, yeah.
I was talking to him all nervously on the phone, and well, when do you know you've made it or whatever? And he said, "Kid, I've been in the business. I think he said 25 years at that point. I don't know. This was like the late 80s. He said, I've been in the business 25 years, and I learned something every day. You never stop learning. Every day I learned something." And there would be times in my career where I get a little smug and think I know it all. And it's just amazing. You never do stop learning. That's why, I'm always fascinated listening to Eric Bischoff talk about stuff, all the behind the scenes deal making, and it's just that stuff that's beyond my pay grade, but it explains a lot of things to me, as an outsider looking at.
And you just kind of like never know where you're going to end up. Like you mentioned, ended up in ECW. You weren't really supposed to be with the Unholy Alliance, right? You were supposed to be with Mike Awesome at first, weren't you? Or was it supposed to be Raven?
They pitched Mike Awesome, or it was pitched to me through Raven. And I just started, Raven told me I've just got to start showing up. And he basically made me drive him around and carry his bags. So and Paul didn't talk to me for a while. But everything with that at every point fell together as a happy accident. There's a Jewish folklore speaks of the Shlemiel who stumbles backwards into heaven, the fool who stumbles backwards into heaven. And that's kind of what my whole experience in ECW was. There were really no long-term plans. When Mikey and I got thrown together, and if you had asked me if I wanted to manage Mikey Whipwreck at that time, I'd never watched ECW. I come in now, and a lot of the big guys were gone, so you had a lot of cruiserweights in there.
Yep.
And I'd heard of Mikey Whipwreck, but he wasn't much bigger than I was, And all I knew was he had a reputation for being the guy who was always slipping on a banana peel. And if you had asked me if I thought that would be a good pairing before I got thrown right into the deep end of the pool with him, I would have told you no. Can't put me with him. It was great. And we just, again, we did the exact opposite of what everybody else was doing. Everybody was trying to be hardcore and use profanity. We turned into clowns. And despite my best intentions, we became baby faces. And I can't even remember how we hooked up with Tajiri. They were wrestling each other. And some spot happened in a tag match. Maybe it was a tag match or singles. I can't recall. But they started ad-libbing some sort of Japanese bowing or something. And Mikey's a clown anyway. And the crowd popped, and they just kind of organically shook hands or whatever. The crowd got up with it, and Paul put them together like the next week, and that took off like a rocket. There was a lot of fun working with those guys. And ECW was the craziest place in the world to be at that time.
So that's not just a myth. That's actually true. ECW was nuts.
Oh, that was the end of the Wild West era, just about. I tell people every day, and they ask me about that, I'm like, no, wrestling bears no resemblance today. It's all guys on their cell phones or their iPads, techie guys, well-behaved guys that didn't come up through the era of booze and cocaine and pills and whatever the hell else everybody was on back in the day. It was a very different experience. And of course, in ECW, people could get away with just openly doing stuff. Really, for about nobody. I mean, in WCW, you'd at least have to hide it or try. You would get fired if somebody came around a corner and saw you smoking a joint, or whatever, or if you were passed out, which I think happened to some of Raven's flock back in the day. but it was just a wide open, anything goes environment. But it was a lot of fun.
I guess you kind of take the good and the bad with that, though, right? I mean, there's obviously safety reasons or health reasons. It's probably better maybe to be these techie nerds playing video
Oh
games
yeah,
rather than doing all that crazy stuff. But then it almost takes a little bit of personality out of these guys. You know what I mean? Not the same.
yeah. Well, I was talking to one of my colleagues, and we were lamenting the fact that everyone is so well behaved, so well educated these days that you miss. There's something missing from the locker room when you have a maniac like Iron Sheik or Sandman or New Jack or Knobs and Sags. That's part of the ambiance of wrestling. That I think every locker room should have at least like one or two crazy people for morale. Just to,
Yes.
people, it gives you something to talk about and laugh about it, and they're almost like court jesters. People who fill that role. But yeah, it's definitely a safer time to be in the wrestling business. You don't have ring rats anymore. They've almost completely. And for those watching this who don't know, a ring rat is what groupies were called.
Right.
They're gone. It used to be in the old days you could come to the hotel, and if you ever see those documentaries on, say, National Geographic, the wildebeest come billowing across the Serengeti or wherever it is, and they have to cross this one river to get that isn't too wide, but they have to cross it to get to where they're migrating to.
Yep.
And there laying for them are a bunch of crocodiles, and they just start snapping them. That's how it used to be. After the matches, you'd be in the bars, and the women just came down there. It wasn't even fair. It was stupid. The guy who was putting up the ring, or driving the ring truck, was getting laid. It was like 1996 to 2001, 2002. Crazy time as far as the spoils of war go. Of course, then, God, how many wrestlers died in that period?
Right.
63 or something due to misadventure. And when you're not impaired, you're less likely to be doing things that are going to harm yourselves, that are going to require more self-medication to get through the next match because you never took care of the first injury properly. So it's a much safer time. But I still get a little nostalgic. I've still got a little outlaw in me.
Yeah, the good old days, for sure. Yes. As we hit the wind down, we head towards the finish. Now, as far as being safe, I don't think that Sal and Gags and their team, I don't think they're going to be safe because of the Devil's Last Dance, Ultimate Hardcore War, which, of course, is a part of Samhain, NWA. Samhain, I'm sorry. I always get the wrong. Samhain,
Yep.
October 28th on Fight TV on pay-per-view. Give us one last big push for the pay-per-view and what you'll be doing on this crazy show, which, of course, you can get the tickets, nwatix.com.
Okay. Among other matches, let me get the lineup. Let's see. Thrillbilly Silas Mason will be defending the NWA National Heavyweight Championship against Chris Adonis. That is sure to be an awesome matchup. I have a great deal of respect for both of those guys. Matt Cardona has a match to be announced. His opponent has not been listed thus far. The Southern Six, the oddly named Southern Six, which will be Kerry Morton and Alex Taylor. With Ricky Morton will take on the Headbangers, Mosh and Thrasher, coming into NWA for the first time. That will be a rock and roll tag team match. Violent J from the Insane Clown Posse and the Brothers of Funstruction, Yabo and Ruffo, will take on Vampiro and La Rebellion, which is Bestia 666 and Mecha Wolf, in a Riddle Box 6-man tag team match. Jax Dane will be taking on Bulletproof Truth with Chris Silvio Esquire in a submission match. Blunt Force Trauma, Carnage and Damage with Aaron Stevens will take on Mike Knox and Trevor Murdoch in a Knights of the Round Table tables match for the NWA World Tag Team Championship. Pretty Empowered, Ella Envy and Kylie Page will take on Natalia Markova and Taylor Rising for the NWA Women's Tag Team Championship. Colby Corino will face Joe Alonzo in a pillar to post match for the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Championship. Kenzie Page will be defending the NWA Women's Television Championship against Ruthie J. And in the main event, EC3 will be taking on and defending the NWA World Heavyweight Championship against Tom Latimer with his lady Camille. That is a no limits match. No limits match for the NWA World's Heavyweight Championship. Again, tickets are available for the live event at nwatix.com, and it can be purchased on pay-per-view, FITETV.com.
And what about you? Where can everybody find the Sinister Minister, Father James Mitchell?
Let's see, on Twitter or X, I'm at Minister Real, MINISTEREREAL. And let me see, on Facebook, where you can also buy some nifty Sinister Minister merch and t-shirts. Let's see, how am I listed there? It's under James Mitchell, but I believe there is because there's a million James Mitchells, I believe it's jamesmitchell.731. Give me just 1 second here, and I will let you know. And I can't find the damn thing. Hold on. Fill in my dead air for me, John. Hold on.
NWATix.com for tickets. Obviously, Fight TV. Go to Fight TV to order the pay-per-view October 28th. Tempe Live at the Cleveland Masonic in Cleveland, Ohio. The NWA's debut in Cleveland, Ohio. The hometown of the NWA World Heavyweight Champion EC3. It's going to be a big-time pay-per-view. Hopefully will be a year-round, or not year-round, an annual pay-per-view, an annual show for the NWA, because, I love the Halloween stuff, Halloween Havoc. I mean, I've always been a big Halloween fan.
As have I, although as I got older, Halloween became an everyday thing for me. So
True.
It's a day when I get to watch the amateurs.
Yes.
It's kind of like me on New Year's Eve. It's amateur night, but a great time will be had by all. Okay, so by the way, I am on Facebook. If you'd like to find me on there. I don't know if you can see this.
Yep.
Because there are some fake Facebook accounts. I think the address on this is jamesmitchell.731, although it doesn't say here. But if you see this picture of me with the let me try to get this here.
Yep.
This one.
Yes, with the red in the background. Yes.
The red in the background. That's the real me. And you can get some really cool ass Sinister Minister swag there. Just hit me up on Messenger and I can send you any of that, and I will accept your friend request and answer any questions you may have for me.
All right. Awesome. Father James Mitchell, thank you so much for all the time. Everybody check out NWA pay-per-view this Saturday. Samhain. October 28th. Big time show. Check out Fight TV and, of course, NWATix.com. Father James, thank you so much for all the time.
Thank you, John.